Welcome to the Living Superhuman Fitness Podcast, where we take you inside our gym, CrossFit Palm Beach, each week. It's here that we are creating new superhumans every day, transforming people's lives, helping them reach a level of health they never knew possible. We strive to answer your most burning questions on fitness, health, nutrition, training, motivation, mindset, lifestyle, and more. If you have a question, please email us at info@crossfitpalmbeach.com. You can also learn more on our blog, livingsuperhuman.com. And if you have a moment, we'd love a review from you on iTunes. All right, it's time. Let's stop being average and start living superhuman. Welcome to the Living Superhuman Fitness Podcast. My name is Andrew Frezza, and I'm joined today by
Austin Bettigrew,
Whitney Stevenson,
Zach Egan.
And today we're going to be talking about how to master any skill in CrossFit and BeachFit. And the idea for this topic kind of came from, we just started a new one-on-one personal coach program where we, mainly in our CrossFit classes, we have some BeachFitters as well, that are taking advantage of individualized programming outside of classes, as well as monthly skill sessions where they're working with a coach for 30 minutes at a time to develop certain skills. So we wanted to give you guys a window into how we think about getting skills and attaining skills, and how we break it down and maybe assess an athlete and then start to progress them towards their goals. And then we wanted to talk about how, even if you're not willing to put in extra time, maybe you don't have any time at all, how you can change your approach in classes to develop your skills, or if you do have extra time, how you can maximize that extra time to get the most out of that extra time you're going to be putting in. So I want to kick things off with talking about inside the class first. How can we maximize the time we're already putting in to develop certain skills? And I want to just kind of kick it over to you guys. Like, what are some of the big mistakes that you see when it comes to people that say, oh, I want to get stronger, I want to get pull-ups, I want to get toes to bar, but what are they maybe doing wrong in class or missing in class that's preventing them from developing these skills over time?
I mean, something that's really easy is just knowing what the workout is.
Yeah.
Like, we post it ahead of time. You can prepare yourself with it. And if it's a movement that, you don't necessarily have, or maybe you're not strong at, maybe you can mentally prepare yourself to get there a little bit early, have a conversation with the coach, figure out hey, what would be the best way for me to do this? Because I really want to work on this skill. And that way you're going into the workout prepared, you know what it is, for instance, if it's rope climbs, for example, and you really want to work on them, but you show up in shorts and really slippery running shoes, you didn't set yourself up at all to work on them. It's going to be really difficult because you're going to end up with rope burns on your legs and not having the right grip. And yeah, there's other variations of stuff to work on, but if you show up and you're prepared, and it makes it easier for the coach to kind of give you drills or things to do in the class, that would maybe keep the stimulus of the workout but still get you closer to developing that skill. So I think that's just a really simple one. Just know what the workout is before you show up.
Yeah.
I think another simple one is just realizing that the little detailed movements that we do play into the bigger picture movements. So for example, a pull-up, everyone wants a pull-up, a strict pull-up, whatever it may be. But if we do a movement that's similar in movement, like a dumbbell bent over row, they're not as bought into that movement, even though that movement could eventually help them with the bigger picture movement. So I think the little detailed movements like that are something that you should definitely put your focus on a little bit more if you want to work to those bigger movements. And I think we try at least to give that or portray that picture at the whiteboard of why we're doing this. In the notes that we give in the workout descriptions, try to do that too. So if that's a skill that you're wanting to work on, something like a pull-up, look into the finer details of the programming, because it's probably there to help you.
That's really good.
Yeah, one thing that I think about is doing less but better. I think there's so many times where we put a rep scheme on the board and people always feel attached to that rep scheme. And we try to, and again in our description, say, hey, if you can't do 12 toes to bar in 2 to 3 sets, let's put that down to 8, let's put that down to 9. And you're better off doing less but better, higher quality reps, because you're going to be able to build momentum off of that, and you're going to develop good movement patterns, muscle memory, than trying to always just kind of go what's on the board. And people don't necessarily know how to make those adjustments. Utilize your coaches. But a lot of times if you listen to how we're describing stuff in workouts, we're giving you those little tips that you can really latch onto and build off of, or you can just kind of gloss over and not pay attention during those times.
Especially like during warm-ups, I feel like you get a ton of those little tips, like, you know, during scat pull-ups or kip swings or a lot of those kind of drills that you can build upon. And you, as coaches, I know we offer a ton of like advice and tips, and kind of some people just gloss over in the warm-up. And there's a few people, Johnny Mac, I'll talk about, because he'll sell himself out in the warm-up. He just does everything 100%. And by the end, he's just dripping in sweat, and you're like, he's fully prepared himself, and it's really cool to see that. And I think that if you just, you know, sometimes the warm-up is partially getting rid of whatever, you know, you're coming in with, like from your day at work or from last night's sleep or whatever. But if you can kind of get into the movements in the warm-up even more, and really listen to what the coaches are trying to say and like demonstration, and make those movements the best that you can in that moment, you're going to get more out of your warm-up, and you're going to start developing on those little like basic fundamental movements that you need in order to like learn a more advanced skill.
I would say also too, and this kind of maybe takes it back to more simple, but utilizing, like you said, utilizing your coaches and talking to them, have a conversation with them before the class even starts, because you might have 20 people in the class, and I might not be familiar with your weaknesses and your strengths. You might have 4 movements in that day. Let's say it's like rope climbs, a great example, GHD sit-ups, deadlifts, and something else. You know, if you need to focus on rope climbs, if that's a weakness of yours that you need to improve on, then maybe tell the coach before the class even starts. Say, hey, you know, rope climbs is something that I struggle with. Like, will you watch me today? Will you come up and like just give me a mental dump on everything that I'm doing, and just kind of like, you know, give me some not just tips, because we want to do that with everybody, but take this movement further with me today, because I really need to work on this and I want you to do that. And then we can take that approach. It might not be on our radar because we're doing a lot of other functions within the class.
Yeah, I think it's helpful when someone like rope climbs would say, hey, the most I've ever done in a workout is 3. You know, I've only been to the top, you know, once. Like, if you can give us those quick little details, we can give you so much more to build off of. And then, I think the rope climb is such a good example, because you can work on so many parts of it. You can work on the jump and getting that first initial takeoff. You can work on the knees to elbow aspect of it and bringing your core up higher, your hips up higher. You can work on your foot clamp and getting that stronger. You can try a new foot clamp, right? Yeah. So it's being able to approach a workout in a way where there's a goal that's unrelated to the score that you're going to post into SugarWOD, right? My goal for today is to do every rope climb in 2 pulls. My goal for today is just stick with the J hook. Even if I'm not making it to the top, I know that J hook's going to be best for me long term. So I want to work on it today in this particular workout, even though I know it's not going to be my best result for today. So it's that sacrificing of the short term for the long term gains.
That's a great word, sacrificing that score on the whiteboard for today in order to get better for future workouts. That's hard for a lot of people to do.
It's very hard.
I mean, I know we have like our non-scale goals for nutrition. It's sort of like your non-SugarWOD goal would be to, like, you know, how can I set a goal to move better in the class? And like, especially if you're somebody that wants to develop skill and maybe learn like a bar muscle up, and you know, like, how can you set a goal for, you know, 3 classes a week to move really well in those classes versus like, I know it's fun to like go for it and like try to get the best score you can, but maybe save those for like 2 classes a week or 1, and then set at least 3 or 4 trying to move better, and have like little movement goals associated with those classes would be something easy to do.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about, I feel like we focus more on the gymnastics piece. Let's talk about the strength piece in classes. I think there's some common mistakes there. One that stands out to me is like we do a decent amount of tempo work. And I think if you're going too heavy and then missing the tempo, you're missing so much there. There's so many benefits in that tempo work. And if you go too heavy and past that, you've just really kind of wasted a day in a lot of sense. So that's a big one for me. I think there's a lot of mistakes in the Olympic lifts as well, of people not choosing appropriate weights. What do you feel is that like sweet spot when it comes to like quality of movements, weights, all that stuff?
Well, I mean, staying sub-maximal on your Olympic lifts in order to improve on technique is going to be what you need to eventually set PRs and get stronger, and maybe not from a like raw strength perspective, but improving those lifts. You know, now that I've spent more time in the Olympic lifting world and Olympic lifting setting, they never max out. I mean, they really never do, and they
It's
never
like
go,
once or twice a year,
yeah,
right?
they hardly ever go even close to it. There's a lot of pulls and pauses and positional work, and
you guys do a
piece-
lot of lifting stuff. What percentages are you sitting in when you're doing, and how much are you resting between sets? What does that look like when you feel like you're making the most improvements on your Olympic lifts?
Well, I mean, from a purely Olympic lifting standpoint, it's probably 2 to 4 minutes in between a lift or a set of lifts or a complex that you're doing. If you're doing CrossFit, typically that's going to look different because we're doing a lot of capacity stuff and battery work. So you're going to be doing EMOMs every 2 minutes, things like that. But yeah, if you are really trying to improve on that stuff, then you're going to be doing 3 minutes rest in between, 4 minutes rest in between, and you're focusing on perfect movement. And if the perfection of that movement isn't preserved, or at least a bulk of that integrity of that movement isn't preserved, then you're really not building past that. So
Yeah.
we're talking as you're building up into it, it's a lot of work in 70 to 80%, and that range maybe up into the 85% range. But I mean, I know for a lot of my stuff, it looks like 80 to 85% is a lot of stuff that I'm doing, and I'm doing multiple reps in different complexes within those numbers.
Yeah, and I think just from, again, just like a reiteration of like moving well in warm up, like that's one of the main things whenever I go and like work on my Olympic lifting is like from the PVC pipe to 80%, or when I'm starting my working sets, you're moving the bar the same. You're moving the PVC pipe the same as a 200-pound bar for clean and jerk. So like moving well from the very beginning, like owning every movement in every position from the lightest to the heaviest, and having consistency obviously through that is so important. I feel like that's one of the major shifts that I've had. It wasn't just about like getting warm and moving, it was about that, but also like dialing in those positions from the very beginning, and how important that is to set you up for better positions with a heavier bar. So if you're moving the PVC pipe poorly and waiting for weight to be on the bar to like start getting into positions, you're kind of setting yourself up for poor movements when you start to get closer to that maximal lift, or even within that like 75 to 80% range, you're going to start to see the errors because you're doing the errors with 8 ounces,
I love the phrase owning the movement.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, when that still sticks in my mind. It's funny you said that, because the first time I went to Glenn Penley's lifting seminar, he had someone there lifting, one of his lifters, I forget the name, and that was the thing that stood out the most, is he moved the empty bar like it was 400 pounds, and nothing changed. Like if you didn't see the end of the bar, what was on it, nothing changed from like up until about 90%, not a single thing changed. And it showed me so much about it. And I think we do a lot of position work in CrossFit, but even BeachFit, we're breaking down movements in warm-ups, and a lot of people think that's for the beginners. They don't realize that us, as being more on the advanced side with these movements, that's exactly how we would warm up with these things. We are going through those movements, being very mindful every single time, and if you take that for granted, if you're waiting for the weight, it's a huge missed opportunity.
Yeah.
You should be able to make that PVC pipe look heavy.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think we talk about a lot, actually, but most people, if they're honest with themselves, they have a hard time making that PVC pipe look heavy. Like, I know good lifters, like they can make that thing look like it's 225 pounds when they move it. And if you're not able to do that, that means that you don't have the motor control to do that, and that's where you have to be spending most of your time.
Yeah.
If you watch a video of a lot of like the really good Olympians, they are with a empty barbell for a long time. They move with that just the empty barbell. It's almost annoying. Like if you watch some of their videos, and in some of these videos you can go watch on YouTube, they'll have the lifters, they'll go through their entire warm-up and their entire workout. Like they'll film the whole thing. And it's like, all right, put some weight on the bar already. Like I just want to see it. But they just play around with that bar for a long time. And in a lot of it's actually like less of the warm-up of like actually warming up tissue and mobility and stuff. And it's more of just constantly repping the bar.
It's almost like building a connection with the
Yeah.
bar. Yeah, it's really cool. You brought something up earlier, which is like when you do your lifting work, you're resting 2 to 4 minutes in class, and that a lot of times in CrossFit, we're doing EMOMs and stuff like that. And I think it just speaks to relative percentages. If you're working at 70 to 80% of your 1 rep max, and you have 2 to 4 minutes of rest, what does that say when we're only giving our athletes 60 to 75 to 90 seconds of rest, right? We should be even lower on those percentages more often, right? There's times to go heavy, there's times where we give open windows, but if that's the setup, then that actually takes 5 to 10 to 15% off of what we can hit consistently, and we got to know that. And then on the flip side, if you are going to attack this outside of class, then realistically, to be fully fresh, you need that 2 to 4 minutes. I mean, I was just thinking about our bench press. We did dumbbell bench press the other day. It was every 2 minutes, and a lot of people by that 4th or 5th set were actually getting less reps they were getting on 2nd and 3rd without increasing weight because it wasn't a full recovery. And sometimes with like dynamic lifts that happen fast, we can kind of get away with not knowing what a full recovery feels like. But when something's strict and you hit true failure, you know what it feels like. So like we know that you really need 2 full minutes or more to recover your muscles and get that good strength building.
Yeah, for sure.
And then they're not firing the same way, so then you start to get into your really maximal loads, and it doesn't feel right. It won't feel the same anymore. So many, I mean, how many people that are in our normal classes, one day 95% feels great, and the next day 95% they can't hit it.
Yeah.
And then they don't hit it for 2 months, and they're like, I don't know what's because you know, you have to spend some time sitting in those lower percentages and improving that movement. You could eventually get into an EMOM where you're hitting a higher percentage, but that comes with perfected technique, and that only happens with more rest and more focus on the integrity of the movement.
Yeah, I kind of feel like a lot of people think it's like easier because it's lighter too. Like in an EMOM example, like they're gonna load the bar because it's like heavy, and then it's gonna feel harder for the duration of the EMOM. Where if they stayed lighter, it wouldn't feel as hard. But like if you're mentally focusing and again owning your positions and trying to really dial in your technique, that EMOM is way harder with a lighter bar than a heavy bar and doing sloppy technique. And you're gonna get way more out of it in the long run with taking some weight off and kind of working with what would feel easier weight than loading it up for it to feel heavy and hard and then really not ever improving your technique at all. I think that a lot of people don't understand. I mean, I'll have lightweight on the bar, and granted, that gym doesn't have air conditioning, but like I'll be dripping sweat because I'm so focused and I'm trying to hold positions for so long and make everything so perfect that like it's hard. It's hard to be technically correct. Like I feel like that's way harder than just like being sloppy and ripping it from the floor. So even if it's heavier. So
especially when tempos are involved. It's like, exaggerate the tempo. Don't just hit it, exaggerate it. And that's something that I've been doing, just kind of an accessory program. And I don't know, I've always known this, but they said it the best way, is that if any movement you do, if you can move slower on the way down in the eccentric and move faster on the way up, that simple thing, that's someone that anybody can take to almost any movement. That simple approach can make you better at almost every single movement. Is going the eccentric, the lowering phase a little bit slower, and then accelerating on the way up. There's so many people that are going just that little bit too heavy to not be able to hold that speed, and then they miss out on the gains of that movement.
That's something that really hit me. Are you talking about active life?
Active life, yep. That's exactly how they explain their movements.
Yeah, and that's how they really hammered that home when I was with them a couple of years ago, and I found so much benefit from that in all of my movements. And that's why, like BeachFit, you'll see if we do any type of weighted squatting or deadlift, you will hardly ever see that movement without a tempo on it, because we're not doing things for time necessarily. We're not doing things for a score. So why wouldn't we do a tempo on every single movement when we understand? And it's usually like, eccentric 2 seconds, explode out, right? Because from a physical standpoint, we're always going to benefit from that. Always.
Yeah. I mean, I think even beyond just the gym, like all of that tempo work, whether you have weight, whether it's, we did tempo planks or hip drop planks the other day. And I think no matter what tempo you're doing, it always is going to teach you body control and like that's going to teach you or take you so much further outside of the gym. Like if you have spatial awareness and control over your body, you're going to be able to do those cool things like snowboard and paddleboard and kayak and not injure yourself, like getting up from the toilet too fast. And like this is going to keep you healthier, safer, longer outside of the gym, incorporating it in here, because you're teaching your body and you're teaching your mind how to like have that connection of, okay, like how am I moving, how am I controlling this weight, and being in control. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a great piece, is like the longevity piece. Like if you want to develop skills, not missing 3 months due to injury is a great way to develop your skills. Right? So that control really helps to prevent that.
And a lot of skills have to do with having body awareness. Like that's why I think athletes that have body awareness sports like gymnastics or swimming that are super technical, maybe certain track events, they're going to exceed in here because at this high level skills, because they have more body awareness. And if you build upon that, that's going to help you build to, even if you're doing a tempo of something that doesn't seem like it would apply, but like a tempo side plank hip drop, that might actually help you get more muscle up because you're learning body control, you're learning to hold that position, and all of that will translate over.
That's why we can claim to be the fittest on earth. It's not because we're super strong, although that is part of it, but it's because we're doing gymnastics, we're doing static holds, handstand holds,
testing everything.
Everything. And so that's a part of the method,
Cool. Let's talk about just like another thing in class is like, I know there's many times where, we might be helping an athlete, advising them to take weight off their bar. There might be times where they're trying to go for toes to bar and we're telling them, hey, no, go to knees to chest and work on your rhythm. I don't know if there's other examples that you guys can think of that you want to share, but like, is there a way to reframe that in our athletes' minds? Like, because I feel like there's so many times where athletes are resistant to it. They're resistant to that coaching. They think that we're scaling them to make them do less, when really it's like in our minds, we see all the building blocks of where this is going to take them, but it's hard to explain that in 5 seconds in a middle of a CrossFit workout. And a lot of times we're just jumping to what we know is going to help them the most, and that can be taken as like, hey, why are you backing me off when I can do this thing? I know I can do this thing. I've done it before. What thoughts do you guys have on that? Is there specific movements that you find that coming up on the most?
I think I know we just touched it, but I think it's usually the weights that come involved the most when it comes to trying to back people off. And I think it's like funny, like building on like what you guys are just saying, is you spend time at those 70 to 80, 85% and you just perfect the movement. But yeah, if we try to do that in here, it's like the biggest ego hit that they've ever had to take in their life. And it's like, we're not doing it to embarrass you or to make you feel like you can't do something. But if we can make you do it better, then why wouldn't we do it? That's literally why you guys pay, hopefully, why you guys pay us, is to make you better. And that's all we're trying to do. And if it's a rope climb and we do the rope assisted pull-ups that we've been adding in quite often, is work on the clamp. And then once you feel super confident with that, then jump up on the rope. But I think anytime we modify something, in our eyes at least, I know we all know, is like, that's a good thing. It's not like we're punishing you in any way, shape, or form. We want you guys to think of it as a positive, and we're making you better or taking you one step further, hopefully beyond what you currently are at.
Yeah, anything that you do, and it's not just in the gym, everything's a pyramid. And everything has a foundation and has to be present in order to progress to the top of the pyramid. And, it doesn't matter whether you're in the gym or you're doing math or you're trying to build a car. It doesn't really matter what you're doing. If you try to skip steps, you end up having something go wrong. And so we don't want anything to go wrong. We want people to progress to the point where they are mastering things. In order to master things, you have to go through the prerequisite things, the prerequisite steps that have to be present. Like I said, everything is built on this pyramid concept. And so, that's what we're doing, is we're trying to give you the keys to master things and not just be really kind of good at it. You can get kind of good at anything really quickly, but to master something, it takes patience and discipline and control and an ability to check your ego. The people, and that's a great example or concept that you're talking about, like an ego and an ego hit. Like, the best clients that we have, the ones that we have seen improve to the best possible point that they can get to are the ones that never have an ego, and they're willing to take a step back or 5 steps back or whatever it is every time that we say that.
One way to flip that, thinking back to our comp train camp, was I remember Ben talking about when him and Katrin find a weakness for her, they get excited, because that's something that they know is an opportunity for growth that maybe wasn't there. So like maybe you feel like, hey, I'm decent at toes to bar, but I want to be great at toes to bar. If a coach finds something you can do better at in that movement, that's a win, because before that, prior to that, you were always going to be decent at toes to bar. You were never going to be great at them. So if they're able to find something that could be better, you should be thinking of that as a win, because now you're like, okay, so if I can fix that thing, now my toes to bar can be one of the best in the gym, right? So it's looking at it as an opportunity, getting excited when a coach is giving you cues, even in a movement you're already good at, because now it's an opportunity for growth. And one thing I don't think we talk about enough as coaches, and I think we could do a better job, is the CrossFit mantra of mechanics, consistency, and intensity. And they teach us at the level 1 and level 2 that it starts with mechanics. We have to do things safely, correctly. Then we need to be able to do them consistently, even under fatigue, a little bit of fatigue, and then we can start to add a lot of intensity once those first 2 things are in place, but only once those first 2 things are in place. And I think also, as you mentioned with like kind of the pyramid, it's something where you can build up that mechanics, consistency, intensity, and then after a couple years or after 6 months, you go back to mechanics, and you kind of always rebuild from the ground up. Once you've kind of hit that upper limit of what you're capable of, is like revisit mechanics again and go back from the ground up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's just never like a complete straight line from like starting and where you want to be. It's like always going to be kind of up and down. And I mean, just personally, I can share like the coach I'm working with basically took a barbell out of my hand for like 6 weeks after I was like basically lifting 2 sessions a day. And like there was some upper body issues, there was some like thoracic things I needed to work on, and like I didn't snatch or clean for like 6 to 8 weeks almost when I first started working with him, because he saw some weaknesses and some like structural weaknesses that he wanted to work on without the bar, because as soon as the barbell becomes involved, it's like old numbers and PR and ego and all of that. So that was completely removed, and I was kind of like wary at first, and then I was like, okay, well, I obviously need to work on something, and maybe, we worked on like building up my upper body more. And so I was like, okay, I'm just gonna like do it. Whatever happens is gonna happen. And I feel so much better now. And it's sort of like, kind of like trusting in that person that's seeing like, like Austin, if he's seeing something going off, in your body and he's asking you to like drop the weight, kind of have to have that like trust, like this person knows what they're doing, and like they're seeing something go off, and like even though I know I can like struggle to get this over my head, he's having me take it down a bit, and then all right, now I'm getting the better technique, okay, this feels better, and then eventually you'll be able to put that weight back on and be just as easy as the lightweight at a little bit heavier. So I mean, even however many years I am into this, and however good like people may think I am, like it's still the same process. Like you still have that like, taking 2 steps forward, taking 1 step back, looking back, am I still keeping the basics like in line? Am I still mastering all those positions? Am I not? Okay, I need to work on developing this more. And like, just knowing that that's part of the process. That's part of how you get better. It's not just like, oh, I just put more weight on the bar and I get better. Like there's so much more that goes into it.
I think it's a good time to talk about assessment and data.
Yeah, for sure.
Because like, he figured that out. Your coach figured that out, not from the seeing test, but like he did a lot of work with you, and he put a lot of time into that, and he recorded a lot of data. And from that, what we would see is like, oh, Whitney needs to get stronger, so let's get her stronger. But in reality, there was very specific things that you needed to work on, and he had to take you through a very rigorous assessment process. And then he figured out, okay, this is where we need to go. On the surface, it looks like this, but when we dig deeper, the numbers say this. And so I think that's really important, and that's why, getting, if you really are trying to master things and move to that next level, that's where individualized coaching is really important, because it takes time. I mean, I can see people in class and have an idea of where they need to go, but until I really get them and just them, and I get my hands on them, and we get a lot of numbers on paper, it's hard to tell really like what route are we going to take. It's going to make this the best.
Yeah, it's, you know, I can think of a few examples from clients that I started working with this personal coach program is like, you know, I have a client that wants to get muscle ups and she's very strong. And I know this from classes. And one of the reasons we do a 30-minute skill session with everybody is because you have to not only get the assessment, the data, you have to actually see them do it. And one thing that was interesting to me, she busted out 8 strict chest to bar chin-ups. So supinated grip, chest to bar, no problem. Put her in a pronated grip, 0.
Yeah.
Not even that close. And you can't find that stuff. And obviously, if you're an athlete, you probably don't even know where to start to look for something like that. But that's something as a coach, we're going to look at those little finer details and be able to say, okay, how can we start to translate this strength? Because if she wants to get a bar muscle up, it's going to happen in a pronated grip. Even a ring muscle up is more of a neutral grip. So we got to start to work her supinated strength grip into more of a pronated strength grip. So we're doing a lot of mixed grip pull-ups to kind of start to translate those two and blend them, and a lot of mixed grip negatives and stuff like that. Or another example would be someone who can do a ton of pull-ups. You ask them to do a single chest to bar and they just don't have that strength. So we might have to put them on a band, get them used to just actually doing that full range of motion, taking away some of their body weight, get them using the right muscle groups. And then once they drill that movement pattern, now after a few weeks or a few months, it might take a while, but now they're going to translate that chin over bar strength into some chest to bar strength. And there's those little things that, you know, you have to have a lot of knowledge about what you're looking for, and you a lot of times you need an outside set of eyes, set of coaching.
I mean, I know I need outside eyes on me because I can't, it's hard for me to even determine what do I need the most. And even when I do figure that out, you know, to write my own stuff would be silly. Like it would just get, you know, I'd be doing what I want to do all the time. And so, you know, and like, you know, to your point with the chest to bars, like there might be a lot of accessory things that you could be doing that you have not ever done. Like most people in our gym don't know what a pal raise is. You know, they don't understand scapular strength as opposed to like your strength in your lats or your biceps. And like those things are all important, but if one of them is deficient, it's going to be hard to get a chest to bar pull-up. You might be able to do a bunch of chin to bar pull-ups. So like, you know, you won't find that out in class because we're typically not going to do a bunch of pal raises in class. Maybe in a warm-up, but like, I know for my clients, like when we started doing things like a pal raise, like they're like, what is that? And I've never done this before, and I can't even do this with 5 pounds. Yeah, we got to get that right. Stuff like that is very important, and it takes time and it takes assessment.
Definitely. I wanted to kind of give people some of the tools to assess themselves, and I think one of the biggest mistakes that I see is kind of looking at things in a vacuum and not trying to relate it to other things. So someone will say, I think overhead squats is a good example. I'm not good at overhead squats. And I think people you don't see that many people wanting to work on their overhead squats, but you know, for some people the answer is you need PVC pipe. For some people it's shoulder mobility, it's ankle mobility. But I still see a lot of people that just think, oh, it's overhead squats in a vacuum. And they're not starting to do the work to say, okay, well, how is my handstand hold? How is my overhead dumbbell carry? Do I have good upper body mobility? You know, how's my back squat? How's my front squat? These are similar movements. I'm really strong at back squats. I'm really strong at front squats, but my overhead squat isn't very good. Start to kind of piece together the puzzle of related movements. And, you know, we see it with aerobic stuff as well, where people just think they're bad runners. And a lot of that could be a technique issue. If you're a strong rower, you're a strong biker, you're stronger in longer workouts, longer aerobic workouts, you probably have the aerobic capacity to be a good runner. It could be a technique issue. It could be a mental confidence issue. You've always told yourself you're a bad runner. And sometimes just this is one thing I like about Chris Hinshaw. He's really good at developing workouts that build confidence. A confident athlete building workouts that are challenging, but that you can get those little wins and progress off of. And I love that aspect of it. But I want to kind of get people starting to think about the bigger picture with themselves. If they are going to put in time and extra work in, start to think about what part of the movement you're struggling with is also happening in other movements, in other areas.
Absolutely. I think it's so true. I see whenever we have overhead squats in here, it's like a ghost town. I always have like 5.
BeachFit's popular.
Yeah, BeachFit has like 400 members, and then there's 5 over here. And You know, I understand it's a difficult movement, but just to kind of go into that more is like everyone can work on weaknesses. Everyone can do extra work. It's not just for games athletes or competitive athletes, or just because, you know, you're Joe Schmo, or, you know, you don't see yourself taking CrossFit to the next level, doesn't mean that you shouldn't work on your overhead squat if you have poor mobility there. Like, avoiding that movement is going to cause further probably damage to other movements if you're not looking at kind of correcting it or doing the small things to help fix it. I mean, he's gone now, but Dan Smith was a great example of somebody who was probably never going to hold a barbell over his head ever again at one point. And he did the work to do crossover symmetry, work on his mobility, do some myofascial self-release with the lacrosse balls. You know, it didn't take much time before and after every class, or even there was strength work one day or a few days where he wouldn't even do the strength work. He'd go up and do crossover symmetry instead and work on overhead squatting with the crossover bands. And just doing that for however many months, like 6 to 8 months.
I think he did 6 to 8 months of just dumbbells too.
Yeah, and he did 6 to 8 months of just dumbbells, no barbell, and he was able to like place pretty well in the open and do all the open workouts RX, something that he probably thought was never going to happen for himself ever again, which is really cool.
And do a lot of it pain-free.
Yeah.
Too.
Which is, it's amazing. And so, and that's somebody who, if you went and asked him, are you ever going to overhead squat in your life? Like, technically no. There was technically no reason for him to over practice and develop strength in the overhead squat position, but because he dedicated time and just some, dedicated himself, I guess, to improving his shoulder health in general, he was able to do it. And then now he has healthy shoulders. He can confidently pick up a bar. He's not worried about ruining his body for any movement, for a clean, for not only overhead squats, but any movement with the bar, which is really cool. So, I don't know, I think there's some like avoidance that we encounter, and just to kind of like, maybe when it comes up for you, like look into that, like figure out like, okay, like why am I avoiding this? Like maybe I should like try to work on my overhead squat this week, or whatever it is, or ring muscle up, or whatever the work, whatever it is, like if it gives you that feeling of, I don't really want to do this workout, like dive into that more and maybe talk to a coach about it, because you can get some pointers to help you and help you actually build on that, and that's going to create a healthier you longer.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think building onto that is like patience is a huge key.
Oh, yeah.
A huge key of it is like, if you would just be willing to take like, let's say a 3-month window and just practice this, you're actually going to beat yourself in the long run of like outperforming what you would have done if you just wouldn't have spent the 3 months doing it. So another good example is Mike behind the camera. He came to do the personal programming, and his goal is to get stronger in the upper body. But he knows he has a big weakness between his left and his right arm difference-wise. So I have to figure out, well, A, what is that difference weight-wise or any of the movement-wise? So for him, right now, he's doing a lot of single arm pressing, but he's maxing with his weaker arm. He's doing a lot of carries just to work on stability. He's doing a lot of crossover symmetry. We have to figure out the minor details, and no, it's not that fun in the short term, but if you guys have long-term goals of having healthy shoulders, moving maybe shoulder over head weight, whatever it is, like you have to have that patience, and then I promise it's going to outweigh the time if you would have just not done anything. So
yeah, and it's frustrating when you're on your stronger arm and you're like, I know I could do 20 pounds more, but you're sticking with what you could do on your weaker arm. And I love the word practice, and something that always sticks with me is practice versus training versus competing. And I think in any given, you guys talk about maybe taking a 3-month period where you back things off. I think in any given week, even when you're healthy, you're going hard, you have certain days that are more practice focused, more training focused, more competition focused. If every day is competition focused, where it's always about the end result, then we don't get better competing. We get, a lot of times our adaptations of like strength and endurance happen with training, like the percentage based work, doing intervals, stuff like that. And then when it comes to practice and refining skills, it happens very mindfully and low heart rate. The lower the heart rate, almost the better. And it's a lot of our workouts, like we talk about a lot on Thursdays, you could treat this like an active recovery day. You can treat this like a hard day if you've only come once or twice this week. And I think that too many people are trying to go 5 or 6 days straight competing. And we're trying to put more high skill stuff in on Thursdays. We got like rope climbs a decent amount on Thursdays. Sometimes we're doing some high skill core tempo work, and getting people to slow down and treat that like a practice day is really what we're hoping for, and ignoring the people around you and just kind of staying in your own lane for that day. Let's talk about sugar WOD notes, because we were talking about it a little bit, and we find it really helpful as coaches that when you guys as athletes put your detailed notes into sugar WOD, it helps us out a lot. I mean, we're going in there almost every single day to read the notes, and I know when we work with people in individualized programming settings, when someone can give us like a ton of notes about how something went, it is just a difference maker. And you know, if we can see your notes every day, even if I don't coach you for 2 weeks, I can help you out so much more by seeing those detailed notes. And I think it's helpful for yourself, even if no one reads it. If you kind of journal that and talk about what you could do better the next time, or what kind of went wrong in your approach this time around, it makes you a smarter athlete, and you're going to do, you know, it's helpful for your coaches, it's helpful for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, like for an example, today we have a 35-minute cap, and someone finished in 23 minutes with absolutely no notes. So what happened? Like, you were either like really, really fit, or you scaled the workout in some way, but I don't know how, and I don't know where, and I don't know what happened. And so as much as I do love that you recorded your score, because I think recording data is the pinnacle of progression in fitness, I don't know what to do with that number. I don't know how to take that to my next week of writing workouts and the further weeks down the road. Then I have another person who has a score of whatever the score is, but there's like, I did this for this movement, I did this weight, I scaled this one, I actually did advanced on this one. Right. And then from that person, man, I can really use that information to perfect the programming going forward. I can write, you know, if they were my private client, I could write an even more detailed program for them going down the road. Like for example, my client Tracy, I've had her for 3 years. I can write workouts for her that are so detailed. I mean, they are so detailed. I can write the perfect workout for her. And since it's been so long, I like every single week, I mean, to the rep, to the weight, to the pound, I can write things that are perfect for her, that are going to challenge her and take her right to that threshold. If I want to go 1% over that threshold, I know exactly how I can do that. And that's where we want to eventually get with everyone for the whole entire program.
Yeah, especially I think both BeachFit and CrossFit have different levels of fitness that you can be practicing. You can be, you know, doing something over here, you can be doing something fitness related, but maybe you're going to choose to do weights fitness related because of the skill you wanted to do in the sport, and you want to try that more advanced skill. So you're cutting down on the weight. But if you're not recording all of that, if you repeat this workout again, you could be disappointed because you maybe you don't remember that you did things a certain way, and then you're just looking at your score, and it just kind of gives you a good reference point, especially if you are implementing like more practice days, which I think is like really, really useful, especially because we have so many different options, you know. Maybe you're in between an option and you're doing that just so you can put more effort into a different part of the workout. So I think it's super important.
You could be so detailed with it. And there are some of my clients in here that they'll write down, I mean, I love it, because they'll say, like, didn't sleep well last night, wish I had got more water in today, but I didn't drink any water at work today. So I decided to go a little bit lighter, or I did all those things and I still decided to go with the advanced and it crushed me and I feel awful. Whatever it is that like, all of those notes help you later on down the road come up with some perspective on where you're at, and it allows the coaching staff to keep improving and improving and improving, giving you the best possible program they can give you.
It's funny when you say that. There's some times where when I put that in sugar WOD for my own stuff, I'm more proud of my stuff, because like there are many times where I don't sleep or I don't hydrate well, or I didn't, you know, I had to wake up early to coach and I woke up even earlier than my alarm, and I'm like, but when I write the sugar WOD notes in there, I'm like, yeah, but I'm proud of the effort that I put in that day. I still worked as hard as I could, or I still focused on this thing because of those notes. So that was just something that came up for me. So one question I have for you guys is, how many times should people be failing stuff? And I'm specifically thinking about movements like muscle ups, where I see people doing attempt after attempt after attempt after class, where most of what they're doing is failed repetitions. Or in Olympic lifting, I probably see it more in class than outside of class, where it's, in a 10-minute EMOM, 2 or 3 of those minutes are failed minutes, where they failed the attempt on that snatch or that clean and jerk or that front squat. How often in a day, a week, a month, how often should people be failing on that?
So I have a kind of a funny story with that one. And it's a personal story. And when I first went through my first Olympic lifting block, it was an 8-week block. So 8 weeks. And the coach said, don't miss one lift. Not one. I was like, oh, okay, well, I just came from CrossFit where I miss lifts every single day. So this is going to be hard. But what that taught me is details really, really matter. And 2, if I'm not consistent, then I'm not really getting better at all. So what I'm trying to say there is, if we ever have percentage work or anything like that, is we get that you guys want to jump beyond that percentage, but if you can't stay consistent at those lower percentages, don't really expect to be consistent once you get to your 1-rep ranges. And then on the flip side of that, if you're going gymnastics, a cool story actually happened today with Scotty. He got his first muscle up ever. So, cool. But the cool thing about that was we started a month and a half ago-ish, and that's what he told me his goal was to get a ring muscle up. And this was the first day that he tried a ring muscle up. The very first day he tried it. We didn't practice it. We practiced the details of it, but we never attempted a muscle up. We practiced the kip over and over and over again. We practiced the transitions on the low rings over and over and over. And we worked on the details of the strength, the pull up, the dip. And then today, he just put it all together and he got his first one. So I would honestly try to keep failing to a minimum, just to keep your confidence up and work to those movements that you need to work to get you to that point. Not saying that you can't fail. I think you're going to have to fail eventually to know where your threshold even is. But if you know that you don't have it yet, then don't just keep failing. It's going to eventually eat at you and tear you down where you don't want to even try it anymore. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I don't know if I could really say it any better than that. I mean, especially when it comes to high skill and gymnastic stuff, if you can't get it, then that means that you don't have it. And so that means we have to find all the prerequisite things that need to be trained, and we have to master those things before we move on. And just continuing to fail and fail and fail doing things that are incorrect just reinforces incorrect stuff, which I think we all get that. I think everybody gets that in every other aspect of our life, but then we'll come into the CrossFit gym and miss 20 straight ring muscle ups. Why am I not going to get it? It's that principle doesn't apply to anything else that you do. So, but when we're talking about the weightlifting stuff, if you're going to miss a rep, it's because you should be going for a max. And if you're going for a max, your coach is going to tell you when to do that.
Yeah.
So if we haven't said go for a 1-rep max, then you shouldn't be missing. And in an EMOM type of a format, unless it says build to a max, you should be sticking with your percentages, and they should be all makes because you're training in that moment. And especially if you have a good coach, which we at CrossFit Palm Beach believe that we are, you're going to be instructed on when you can miss. And that would be the only time. That would really be the only time. And we were talking about a high skill, a dynamic lift like a clean and jerk or a snatch. There's technique. There's a lot of factors that can go into every single lift. So you might miss a lift. I mean, I know the other day I missed one doing prepping for a meet that I have coming up, and my coach said we're just going to go through that. It's a low percentage. You didn't do what you should have done there. We're just going to roll through that. Let's keep going. But back squat, front squat, strict press, push press, bench press, all of these strength power lifts. If you're failing, that means that you're no longer training, you're testing. Mm-hmm. And testing is not something that we want to do very often. And if we are going to test, we're going to be very explicit in how we instruct you to do that.
Yeah, one thing I hear a lot is if I don't ever go to that weight, how am I ever going to know if I can do that weight? And I think that's true to an extent, but I think people don't realize how rare going to that weight actually happens. Yeah. It might be a couple times a year, not every week I'm trying to go to that weight and see if I can inch out 1 or 2 more pounds than last week. It's staying in those percentages, dialing it in, and then you'll just have you know, the stars will kind of align, you know, 3 months from now, 6 months from now, you'll have a good day and you'll be like, I'm gonna go for it. And then you'll have that, you'll be able to go up in weight, but you just have to be patient in that sense.
Yeah. I would say just like Zach was saying, like the workout will tell you basically when you can, especially with lifting here, it'll say, you know, we're devoting 22 minutes to build to a heavy back squat. We'll probably demo how to bail. Maybe you should be prepared to possibly go heavy enough to fail or get close. If we're up there saying we're doing an EMOM every 90 seconds, you should be at 70% and not missing a lift.
That means
you
that
should
you're
be
not
at
anywhere close to
70%
100%.
not missing a lift. And that's more important than being at 84% and missing your last 2 lifts.
Yeah.
It is more important to be at 70% than like 84. And for that person who's out here doing ring muscle ups like 20 times in a row, that's not practice, you know? You're putting yourself in that competition, adrenaline spiking mode of I'm gonna get this, and then you continue to fail. And like Austin was saying, it doesn't really build confidence. And like we were saying earlier, you're not mastering any of the basics. If you're failing that many reps in a row, I guarantee there's breaks in your hollow body position. You're not engaged in your lats. Your turnover is slow. Maybe you're holding the rings wrong. Like you probably would get more benefit of just doing dead hangs from the ring and learning how to grip the ring properly than attempting failed attempt after failed attempt after failed attempt. There's also going to be workouts like Nasty Girls where there's 7 ring muscle ups in a row and maybe you're on your last round and maybe you fail on rep 4, you fail. That's in a workout, that's in a stimulus, that's different than practicing that skill.
And if you failed in the first rep of the first round, then we would be scaling the whole workout anyway.
Exactly. Then you would make an adjustment, or maybe it was like one of the members got their first bar muscle up on their second attempt. Though they failed their first one, but it was clear that there was just a technical error, and if they adjusted some things, which they ended up doing, then they ended up stringing 3 in a row every round the other day. So it's really good to have a coach's eye and have feedback, and then but also just, again, like Drew was saying, being able to differentiate when am I practicing, when am I competing, and when am I training this, which is all those variables. Doing a workout like Nasty Girls, you're training your muscle ups. Doing 20 singles after class, that would be practice. And if you're failing, you got to cut it back, cut that skill down, cut that intensity down, and do something different.
Yeah.
I think building on that, and one thing I guess going back to even what I was saying was, I don't want you guys to now think that failing is just like not an option.
Yeah.
Because it can happen, and I think you should fail in a sense that you're going to learn from it, if that makes more sense. So the other day we were snatching, and I changed something on someone. I don't even remember who or what it was, but they missed the lift behind them. And I said, perfect, that's what I wanted. And they're like so confused. They're like, but I just missed. I was like, I know, but that's exactly what you need to do. And now we'll just detail in those other things. But so missing to an extent is okay as long as you're getting a learning experience from it and then moving yourself in a positive direction.
That's a great
especially if you're trying something new, a new technique or new cue or something like that. Yeah, it's like something came up when you brought up Scotty, is like so many people want to get the skill the minute they have the skill, instead of like, Scotty, if you would have tried to muscle up 2 weeks ago, Scotty probably could have done a muscle up 2 weeks ago. But he's earning the skill and then some. So when he goes and does it, he has a really great technique, not just barely earning his first. And I think it's okay to have something sort of in the bank, have a muscle up in the bank, like you've never gotten one before, but you've developed all the requisite skills, and then give yourself a little cushion on top of that. Keep developing the skills. And when you know it's there, or you're very confident it's there, then you go for it.
You did that with Haley last year.
Yeah.
She didn't do muscle ups ever, and only worked on her kip swing, only worked on her ring dip, only worked on her turnover for a year. And then when they came in the Open, she did 4. Which is incredible. That was a lot of muscle ups in the bank.
I think a great example of when we would say, go ahead for it.
Yeah, you're ready.
That's a testing scenario.
That's why it was so funny this morning with Scotty. It was his very first one, and we both looked at each other and I was like, was that your first one? Because it was so easy that I was like, now I'm not even sure if that was your first one, but he deserved getting that muscle up at that point. He's worked so long for it, and he's been patient enough to work towards it. So it was awesome to see.
Cool. That's all I got. You guys have anything to add? All right. Thanks for joining. Work on your skills.